Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Extension educators from across Oklahoma have been spending part of their week here in Stillwater on the Oklahoma State University campus, kicking off the centennial year of extension and learning all about how technology can help improve lives on the farm, in business, and for the home and family. And speaking of technology, our wheat experts are partnering with the Mesonet team to provide a new tool for producers grazing wheat. Here's SUNUP's Austin Moore.
Cattle grazing wheat. This combination of Oklahoma's top agricultural commodities can make a producer's fiscal year. The cattle gain beautifully on the wheat, and so long as they are gone by first hollow stem, the wheat will rebound and still produce a solid crop.
First hollow stem is a stage of growth that occurs just before jointing. It's when that developing grain head is still below the soil surface but just about to push through. And what we found with research at OSU over several years is that's the optimal stage to remove cattle from wheat pasture. If you graze past first hollow stem, the cattle gains are pretty good, but the decline in wheat yield for grazing past first hollow stem is very severe, and there isn't enough added gain from the cattle to offset the decline in wheat grain yield.
The best way to determine first hollow stem is to be out in the field scouting.
To check for first hollow stem, you're going to dig up some plants in a non-grazed area. Now, you have to dig up the plants because, again, that developing grain head is still below the soil surface. You're going to look through those plants, find the largest one, and you're going to split open the largest tiller on that plant. Split it open lengthways, and you're going to look and you'll find a green ring there where the developing grain head is, and you'll find some hollow stem below that green ring. When you have 1.5 centimeters of hollow stem below that developing grain head, then the plant is at first hollow stem. You'll need to do that at about 10 different locations or about 10 different plants in order to get a good estimate of where you are, because there can be some variation within the same field.
Now, while each field needs to be checked independently, there's a new tool available from the Oklahoma Mesonet that tells producers when to be in the field scouting.
This particular model was based on about 10 years of research on and off over the past 10 years. We looked at initially 10 years of first hollow stem observations, and what we found is that soil temperatures under sod cover were the best correlated with first hollow stem dates.
This tool offers several views of first hollow stem probability, beginning with a color-coded state map.
So under 5% probability, it's all blue, and then when you get to 5 to 10%, it turns green and then goes up from there. And we recommend that if you're going to scout your fields, you start scouting when the probability level reaches 5%, because things tend to change rapidly once that stage is met. You also can look at individual Mesonet sites and look at charts and tables, and what we have there is going from the current conditions through the 2-week projection period, you can see whether and when the 5% level will be reached or the 50% probability level will be reached. So it's an easy way to look at a particular Mesonet site as well.
The tool is really useful because it not only gives you an estimation or prediction of what's going on right now, but will also allow you to project what might happen 2 weeks into the future, which is really important for our cattle producers because it's hard to move cattle off of wheat pasture overnight. It requires some advanced planning. And with this model, hopefully we can project a little bit and give producers a better heads up as to maybe finding a new home for those cattle.
Scouting remains the best tool, but for those who prefer to use a calendar date, Carlson offers the following recommendation.
For people who don't scout, we would recommend that they certainly remove their cattle when it reaches the 50% level, because what that means is over, say, a 100-year period, 50% of the years would have reached first hollow stem at that particular date. And so to be on the safe side, you definitely want to remove your cattle by the 50% level.
For directions to this map on the Mesonet website, visit our links section at sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. We've seen the temperatures go up and down pretty dramatically, but one of the consistent things is how dry the air has been. We can see that when we look at our first map, a rainfall map from January 8th through Wednesday the 22nd, and we can see that only in the southeast is there any green areas with meaningful rainfall. The rest of the state, very light rain or no rain. Turning to a map of plant available water from the surface down to 16 inches, we can see how the western part of the state is dry. Most of those areas over there, they're coming in at 1.5 inches or less of plant available water. As we move into the yellow areas of the state, we move into areas that are in that 1 to 2 inch range. The green areas on our map have better soil moisture. Those would be in the 3 to 5 inch of plant available water. We do need to remember that wheat fields are going to draw on that water, and they will be lower than what the Mesonet is actually showing. Our dry air and dead grass have left us with a lot of high fire danger days, and that has prompted 12 counties to declare burn bans. Now here's Gary with a more in-depth look on our drought status.
Thanks, Al, and good morning, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this topsy-turvy weather where it's warm one day and brutally cold the next day, but that's January in Oklahoma for you. Now, it's also gotten extremely dry over the last several months, especially in the last 30 days. Let's take a look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map, see where we're at. Now, this latest map is simply the same as last week. We could have shown drought intensification if we wanted to. Unfortunately, the big snowstorm on the East Coast prevented us from making any changes. The author wasn't able to get our changes in time. Otherwise, you probably would have seen those colors ramp up across western Oklahoma, up into north central Oklahoma. So watch for some changes over the next couple of weeks in the drought monitor map. Speaking of dry weather, take a look at this map of consecutive days with less than at least a 1/4 inch of rainfall from the Oklahoma Mesonet. As you can see, some areas have been over 100 days without at least one day of receiving a 1/4 inch of rainfall or snowfall equivalent, the liquid equivalent. So it has gotten extremely dry. Alva there in Woods County is well over 110 days, and pretty much most of western Oklahoma up into north central, even over in a little bit in northeast Oklahoma, getting extremely dry over not only January but also the previous couple of months. So that's where you're going to see that drought start to intensify. Next, let's take a look at the February through April forecasts. These are outlooks from the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center. For temperature, again, for the February through April period, they see increased odds of above normal temperatures for all of the state of Oklahoma. For precipitation, they have us in that white EC category. Now, that's simply a term meaning equal chances, and that means they didn't see any large-scale clues pointing towards either wetter than normal or drier than normal weather. Hopefully by next week we will see some changes in the long-term pattern. That's it for this week. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. And Kim, to start off this week, please tell me you have some good news about prices.
Well, the last couple of days have been good news relative to prices. At the end of the week, wheat prices were up, like Thursday, 12, 13 cents. I think we've hit the bottom and recovered from the bottom of the wheat prices for this marketing year. Now, there's a lot of news out there yet to come in. The wheat's in dormancy, so a lot could happen. But I think we may have bottomed out at least for a little while.
Okay, and then I know you're keeping an eye on some of the news from other countries as well.
Yeah, that's one reason we've driven prices down about $1.25 over the last few months. India's, they'll start harvesting a record crop in March. India also, the government said that they are going to export, and they are right now exporting wheat out of their stocks. You've got Australia had a larger crop than expected. You got Argentina that's getting their things straightened out and is starting to export wheat. The hard red winter wheat stocks are tight, and so we've lost export to these other countries.
And then in terms of corn, how is that playing in?
Well, you know, this time last year, corn was adding 75 to 85 cents a bushel all the way through harvest to the wheat price with the massive corn stocks, the record corn crop we just harvested. We don't have that 75 or 85 cents on the wheat prices, and we're not going to gain it back as we get into the wheat harvest in 2014.
In terms of crop condition, how is the wheat looking in Oklahoma and across the Great Plains?
Well, the plant soil scientists and the people I talk to out there say it looks really good. And I think that's good news for producers. The price is lower, but you can make up for a lot of low prices when you have wheat to sell. And it doesn't matter what prices are. If you don't have wheat to sell, you're not going to make money. So I think the production side is looking real good for the Oklahoma producer, or at least most of them.
And for the next couple of months, what kind of trends do you expect in the market, and then what kind of advice do you have for Oklahoma producers?
Well, there's not a lot of news left to come into the market. We've got a little rally going on right now, and prices, I think, will just waller around until we get wheat out of dormancy in late February, early March, and that India, that supposedly record harvest, comes in there, and we start getting information from the Chinese harvest, the Indian harvest. So I think it's a couple months that we get some real, true price-moving information.
Okay, and of course you'll keep an eye on it for us.
Always.
Okay, Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. Thanks a lot.
In the past, we have discussed the use of a management procedure for supplementing cows, and that's the concept that we call interval feeding, where we take the supplement out not every day, but every other day. However, we've not given much thought to using that same concept for young growing replacement heifers. Now, this is something that I think we can consider if we're in one of those ranching operations where we have the replacement heifers at a location that's quite a ways away from the headquarters, and we're going to have to spend quite a little time and gasoline taking the supplement to those heifers. University of Florida did some research on interval feeding of weaned replacement heifers and had a very, very positive outcome. What they did, they took 60 heifers, half of them were fed the supplement, which in this case was about 4 pounds of dried distiller's grains plus a half a pound of soybean meal. They fed it to them on an everyday basis. The other half of the heifers got exactly the same amount of supplement per week, but only fed at 3 different times, on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. As they followed those heifers through this growing program, they had identical amount of average daily gain, about 1.8 pounds per head per day. As they then took the heifers into and through the breeding season, they had very similar results in terms of the heifers that responded to ester synchronization. Their AI pregnancy rates due to the first service was very, very similar, and the final pregnancy rates, again, were virtually identical. This shows me that if we have that situation where we have some young heifers that we're growing that are located several miles from where the feed is, we can save some of those gasoline and labor dollars by feeding every other day. Now, if we're using one of the ethanol byproduct feeds like they did here, distilled grains, I would certainly recommend that we check the sulfur content, because there is the possibility of feeding that large amount at a given time that we could create some sulfur toxicity. Dried distiller's grains aren't as competitively priced as they were several years ago, so we may be using some of the more common feed ingredients such as wheat midds and soybean meal. But I think if we can keep this concept in mind as we take care of these replacement heifers this year, in some instances we can save some gasoline dollars and some labor dollars. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
These past few weeks, we've seen record prices on top of record prices in the livestock markets. Here to tell us more is Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist. Daryl, really break down what we've seen these past few weeks in terms of prices.
You know, the wholesale beef market, the box beef cutout has set new records in January, pretty much every day since the markets came back online. For the last 2.5 weeks, we've moved up every day. And so what we've seen, the net effect is from January 2nd, when we started the year, at this point, we've seen a full 20% increase in both choice and select box beef prices, and at this point the market has not shown any signs of let up, although you'd expect that to happen pretty soon. Fed cattle prices, a similar thing. Before Christmas we were at 130 for fed cattle prices. Recently we've been at 143, which is again far and above any sort of record we've seen in the past.
So what's really fed into that situation? Why are we seeing those prices now?
Well, you know, there's a number of factors. Part of this is just what we've been building towards for many months. We've talked about tightening supplies. We've talked about, the market getting tighter. Through the holiday period, we always have some unknowns about how well did we move beef and all of that, and we're still trying to sort that out, frankly. But and then you throw in the storms we had around Christmas time. They did disrupt, distribution systems, probably had some slight negative impact on demand, but at this point the supply impacts appear to be much bigger. And so cattle performance was off. Haven't heard of any big death loss in the feedlots, but just, less pounds on the market because of the delays in finishing cattle in this cold weather. And so we're seeing these record prices.
So when does this filter into the retail side of things?
Well, a 20% jump in 2 weeks' time, basically, in wholesale prices is just unprecedented. We've never seen anything like that. Obviously, that puts tremendous pressure on the retail prices as we go forward. A couple things are important here. One is that really for the last 2 years, retailers have been kind of preparing for what they thought was coming. The drought has delayed it, but they've actually kind of built some extra margin into their operations in many cases, so they have a little room to absorb this. And retail prices won't adjust as fast as these wholesale prices will. So the adjustments will occur over the next several weeks to several months. The 20% increase we've seen in wholesale prices won't translate immediately into a 20% increase in retail prices, but it certainly will begin to be reflected in the market over the next several months.
All right. So then the final question: where do we go from here?
It's at this point, we've already taken out the highs that we anticipated here in the first quarter of the year. I wouldn't be surprised to see these markets actually back up and kind of consolidate after this rather breathless run we've had. So we may be a little bit lower, but still at that point probably above where we expected to be. Bottom line is we've got a first quarter average that'll be higher than we expected. This may be the top. Literally, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be a lot lower anytime soon. And then, we'll work our way through the year and we may come back and visit these levels again late in the year.
All right, so what things are you going to be watching to really get a feel for that trend once it starts moving?
We've got several things coming up here. Obviously, in terms of factors that will actually move the market, winter weather. This is the time of year when winter weather can have a big impact. This recent episode shows that the market is very sensitive to that. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. In terms of trying to sort out the numbers, if you will, and the fundamentals, we've got the annual inventory reports coming out here pretty quick. We're going to have some new numbers to work with, and so it's tough to rebuild supplies when you're in a tight supply situation in the wintertime under the best of circumstances. So there's lots of reasons to believe that this market will hang together pretty well, even if it does back down from these incredibly high levels that we've seen recently.
All right, plenty to keep an eye on. Thanks for the update. Daryl Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk a little bit about maybe avoiding a mess after you've used a funnel.
So typically we take our funnels, and especially if they're long, and we put oil into some type of liquid into whatever we want to, and then we get done with it. You can't always get your spout clean.
Yeah, you can try to wipe it out all you want, but it's always going to drip at least a few times afterwards. So you might want to think about just using an old canister of some type, and if you happen to be hanging it on a pegboard or somewhere on the wall, then you could hang this as well.
Yes, and so I've screwed my bottom container to the wall, and then I've got a nail up here to hold my funnel, and then I just let it drip into it and collect the oil from there.
So keep some mess off your bench or off of your floor. That's it this week on Shop Stop. We'll see you next time.
We want to talk about food safety now for smaller producers. Joining us now is Chuck Willoughby here at the Robert M. Kerr Food and Agricultural Products Center. And Chuck, there's been some new regulations in the past few years regarding food safety for smaller producers. Kind of give us an overview of what we can expect.
Well, yes, Lyndall. The Food Safety Modernization Act was enacted or signed into law on January 4th of 2011. And not only did that include all of the food industry that we think of, like food manufacturers and processors, it also included producers, including small producers. Now, small producers have exemptions in there for the time being, but in the future, they are going to have to comply to the Food Safety Modernization Act, the rules that will come about that are being hammered out right now in the near future. So what we're trying to do is get them up to speed on what they need to be prepared for when it comes.
And what kind of operations are we talking about? What kind of products?
Well, right now what we're focusing on, we're working with the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture to educate small dairy producers as well as dairies that might make cheese or cottage cheese or yogurt, things like that, egg breeders and feed manufacturers, as well as fruit and vegetable growers.
And you say that Oklahoma farmers are already doing a pretty good job at meeting some of these guidelines, but it's a matter of documentation and kind of figuring out what the new rules are?
That is correct. A lot of what our producers are doing already meet some good sanitation standards, but many of them, they know what they're doing, they do it out of habit. Just like you and I might clean our kitchen at home, we don't write down that we cleaned our kitchen. Well, what the Act wants producers to do is be very conscious about what they're doing and record that they did it. And so the trainings that we're providing with the Department of Agriculture include things like preventive controls. Well, there are things that a producer knows to do to prevent any contamination from happening, need to record that. So monitoring and record keeping is a very important part to adapt into their current operations.
So you have a series of training sessions upcoming this winter and into the spring. Can you tell us a little bit about what those involve?
Yes, well, we have very many topics that we'll cover in a full one day, including the preventive controls, the monitoring, record keeping, having an awareness of the various microbes or pathogens that can cause illness, just a way for a producer to get away from their operation, come in, see a perspective, get some training, and get a better understanding of what they may already know and what they could learn to do things better.
And all in one day, which is key for a farmer.
It is key because it's hard to get away from the operation for any more than a day. It's already a challenge, even though this is just 8 to 3. It's still a challenge for many of the producers to get there. Our first one for this year, we had 4 last year. We're going to continue 4 this year. And the first one for this year is February 6th in Weatherford at the Western Technology Center.
Okay, and there will be several others taking place throughout the...
Yes, we'll have them around the state, so we're trying to make it convenient for the producers in the state to have a location near them. If they go to our website, they can see where those other trainings are and when they are.
Okay. Chuck, thank you very much. And for more information on the training sessions, we've set up a link for you to the FAPSI website at our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
In the world of food processing, we kind of divide foods into several different categories based on their acid content. And one of them would be, here we have an example, apple butter. This is a naturally high acid food. Most fruits are. And kind of the critical pH limit there is 4.6. So most fruits are going to be well below that. And that means that they're inherently safe with respect to a lot of different kinds of bacteria and other disease-causing organisms that might grow in the product. Makes processing them a lot easier. Then we have foods that are definitely low acid, high pH foods. Mushrooms would be an example of that. Most vegetables are going to fall into that category. These foods are not as inherently safe, and they require a much different type of processing than a high acid food. Then we have foods that we call acidified foods. This would be an example of that. These would be pickled jalapeno peppers. Jalapeno peppers, that's a vegetable. They're naturally low in acid, high in pH. But we've added vinegar in this case to bring that pH down below that critical limit. So we can process these just like we would a fruit product. Basically, that involves a pasteurization type process. So we get them up to roughly 190, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. We may hold them for 5 or 10 minutes at that temperature. That's sufficient to kill those microorganisms of concern. A low acid, high pH food, that's going to require a much more extreme thermal process. For a product like this, we're going to have to cook this for about 15, 20, maybe 25, 30 minutes at a temperature of around 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously, that's not something that you can do at home. That requires some kind of pressure cooker. In the industry, we call that a retort. And sometimes we get inquiries from folks, hey, I have a pressure cooker. Can I make these at home and sell them? The answer is no, you cannot, because that kind of home-style equipment doesn't meet the regulations required for the type of processing that these types of foods need. Last thing I want to mention, if you're doing any canning at home, be sure and follow the recipe. We talked about these products that have vinegar added to get that pH down below the critical limit. We have had some folks that didn't really understand how important that was. They cut the amount of vinegar they were adding because they didn't like the flavor. That had the effect of raising that pH up above that critical limit, and all of a sudden you're dealing with potentially a very serious health hazard. So do take that seriously.
That just about does it for us this week. Our county educators will be taking what they've learned this week and bringing it home to share with you. They'll also be planning centennial celebrations in all 77 counties. If you're interested in getting involved, just contact your local county extension office. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.